I have so many thoughts and a bone to pick with Danessa. So Danessa Myricks released another Lightwork palette. This is number 6 and it is called the Freedom palette. And this one is pretty different from their previous Lightwork palettes. These do have square pans. The previous palettes had round pans and different sizes. These are all the same size. And this palette is just as pricey as their previous palettes, and I bought it from Sephora. And it's $128, and Danessa Myricks is definitely more aimed towards colorful makeup as well as makeup artists. So I think the packaging totally makes sense for that. And I've seen a lot of people raving about how innovative the packaging is, and yes and no. And I'm going to get into it, and it's going to be a tangent, and you don't want to skip through it, trust me. So basically the concept is you remove the lid and you have 3 separate palettes in a larger palette. And then from the cover, you can remove this part, which is a mirror, and you can stack all of the smaller palettes together if you want to remove them and make this more compact. Which, gripe number 1, why not just sell this empty palette separately and then sell these individually or together? Also, taking these palettes out can be a little tricky. You definitely have to be careful. I think your nail kind of needs to be long enough to really reach down into this divot, which is one on each side. So basically I can just stack these on top of each other and make this, you know, this size versus this size, which is really great and more travel friendly. You also get a little pouch that's kind of like a faux leather, and you can just slide this in here. It's a little bit of a tight fit, but it gets in there so you can carry it around. Hypothetically though, you might have noticed when I was holding the palette up that one of the shades was not in the palette, and that is because it broke the second time I opened the palette. I was holding it out for B-roll and this shade just completely fell out of the pan and all over the carpet, and I tried to salvage as much as I could, and I actually even had to use alcohol to try to press whatever was left into the pan. However, the shade just keeps disintegrating, so I had to put more alcohol in there. But I think if you're going to advertise this as something that is travel friendly, especially for makeup artists where it's gonna get banged around in a kit, then I think you really want to make sure that none of the shades are breaking. Like, you want to be able to drop this and they shouldn't break. So I feel like there's a little bit of a plot hole here where some of these shades might be a little bit more fragile. I think it's probably mostly the satin shades. So there are a couple of different formulas in here. There are cream chromes, soft satin mattes, slick chrome, dual chrome crusted sparklers, super chromes, cushion chrome, halo chrome, elastin multichrome, and a glass sheen formula. And then of course you can also rearrange the shadows within these little 6-pan palettes, which in itself is definitely not a new concept. Viseart, which was sold on Sephora, has been doing that for quite a few years, and of course indie brands, etc, etc. There's lots of empty palettes where you can put single eyeshadows, rearrange them however you like. Some of ColourPop's eyeshadow palettes also have removable pans. I think this would be really interesting if you could put other Danessa Myricks pans in here. Build your own little custom palettes with some matte shades from their other palettes, because these pans are specific size and you only get 1.2 grams of product. So these are not the same amount as if you bought a 26mm eyeshadow pan. And I think the most frustrating thing and the biggest miss with this launch is that the groundwork pans do not fit in here. They fit widthwise, but they're just a little too long, so they don't go in here. And I'm just like, why? It's like they're not even that much off. I just really don't understand why not just make these pans the same size, or if they knew they were going to make this palette, to have made the groundwork pans the same size so you can interchange them. I think this is such a miss. When I first saw they were launching this Lightwork palette, I was so excited because I thought I could be building little custom 6-pan color stories with my Danessa Myricks eyeshadows. That to me just seems like the logical concept, that you could do that within a brand just like Viseart. They have a couple different eyeshadow size pans, but they have enough of those pans where you can interchange them, and some of the larger pan palettes, they offer a smaller pan palette. So that makes more sense. As of right now, you'll be only able to interchange the pans that are between these 3 mini palettes. Maybe down the road they will launch some more of these, but I kind of feel like all shimmer palettes are not necessarily like the mainstream thing. And my last grip is with this palette. So you can put your groundwork pans in here along with the Lightwork pans, but there's 3 exposed magnets in here. And I just think you're going to be able to see them. They're obviously there to hold the palettes themselves. So it is nice that this is magnetic, but first of all, I don't think this is safe for the shimmer shadows, given the fact that one of them completely crumbled. I don't think I would feel comfortable putting any of the especially satin shades in this palette. I just really think that this should have been sold separately. And also, if you just want to use this on its own and you want to have the stack like separately, then you have this empty palette with just a hole on the front. And maybe this is just like a me thing and it would just like bother me. But now I'm gonna show you a picture of this filled up with the groundwork and lightwork pan so you can see how that looks. I just think for $128, it's kind of thought out, like it's almost there, but it's not fully there. So those are my thoughts on the packaging. I'm gonna be showing you detailed swatches of each of the shades, talking about the formula, talking about the shifts and the color. And then I'm gonna be doing some comparison swatches, including the previous lightwork palettes from Danessa Myricks. And then I'll be showing you 2 looks that I'm wearing right now. And then at the end of the video, I'll give you some of my thoughts. So let's get right into it. Top shade is Dance, and it is described as a ballerina pink with a silver shift. I don't know if I see a shift. It's more like it's reflecting straight on silver, and it's very, very sheer, more a topper-like shade. Unapologetic below that is described as a suede warm brown. I think that color description is definitely accurate. It's quite orangey, and this one also feels a little bit more thicker to the touch to swatch. It doesn't feel as soft, as silky smooth as the other satins. Unbound is a satin indigo blue. It's a little bit more of like a periwinkle. Love is a silky berry magenta. Bliss is described as a velvet eggplant purple. I don't know about eggplant. I actually feel like the shade below it is more of an eggplant. And the last shade is Empowered, and this is a really dark eggplant purple with a black base, and it has just the slightest shift to it. It's not too shiny, but it's shinier than the satins. Onto the iridescence. I got these color descriptions from Sephora, and I'm definitely questioning some of them. The first shade is Proud, and it is described as warm gold with soft pinkish shift. It's, for me, to my eye, it looks very orange straight on, and it shifts. And I see a shift to like green teal. Below that is Free, which is described as a light hot pink with dove gray shift. I've never seen dove gray being used to describe a shift, so that's really interesting. It does have a taupey silvery base to it for sure. It's a very soft pink straight on. It's definitely not a hot pink though. And I see a shift to orange to gold. Below that is Serenity, which is described as a light neon pink with yellow green shift. To me, that's a purple straight on that shifts to yellow green. These are all very smooth. However, Free is a little bit flaky and a little bit thicker to the touch, so it's a little bit more paste-like. And then Release is very smooth. However, it has a little bit more of like an oily, almost slightly tacky feel to it. And Release is described as a seafoam blue with a lilac shift. I see a green straight on, and then it shifts blue to like an ultraviolet. Rise at the top is a yellow gold with a peach shift. I don't see any peach in the shade. It's very smooth, and it's definitely very yellow and very opaque. And I see maybe just a tiny bit of a shift to blue, like a light blue to green. Below that is Higher, which is described as a electric peach with a flamingo pink shift. Definitely flamingo pink straight on, and it shifts to an orange. Joy is a bright coral with bumblebee gold shift. To me, this one is similar to one of the iridescent shades that was like, it's a slightly pinky purple. The shade and the previous shade are definitely more on the sheer side. And then the last shade is Rejoice, which is described as a vibrant rose gold with an antique gold shift. I guess I see the rose gold, but it's pretty vibrant for a rose gold. This one is very opaque and very smooth, but it does feel just a little bit thicker to the touch, especially when spreading out and swatching. Top shade is Gleaming, which is described as a beetle green with warm brown shift. The warm brown is more of a base, and you can definitely see it on an angle, but you can also see a shift to purple, and the shade is a very smooth. Below that is Fluid, which is a bright teal with light gold shift. I see the light gold straight on with the teal as a base, and then especially in the shift I see that it's almost like an aqua. And below that is Euphoria, which is an orchid purple with a royal plum shift. I see a little bit of a light gold almost in there as well, maybe. And all three of these are pretty smooth, and all three of these are quite smooth. And then the last shade is Nirvana, which is an olive green with a teal shift. Not really sure where they got this description because it's more of an antique orange gold shifting to yellow to green. And this one feels creamy to the touch. It's almost a little bit tacky, and it takes a little bit to spread out. So I rearranged my palette so that all the satins are in this one, minus this one is a little extra sparkly. I had to remove the dark purple shade because it fell out, and I tried to salvage whatever I could, and I used alcohol to press it down, and it's still crumbling in the pan. So it has been exiled out of this palette so that I could film. Picking up this shade, and I'm gonna pop that right into the crease, right in the center of my lid, and take it outwards slightly. I did use the slightly more orangey satin shade yesterday for a look, and it definitely kind of stuck down. It didn't really want to blend out, but I did use a different eyeshadow primer, so I wanted to test it today, and it definitely blended out, and it's for sure going to be more of like a wash if you want it to be. I'm just adding a little bit more right in the crease, and then I'm picking up this shade, and it's going to go on the outer corner and a little bit underneath my lower lash line, but just a tad. Just a tad. And I'm adding on a little bit more. And I'm just kind of blending in. I feel like it's blending away the shade that I put down here. Just taking some setting powder on a clean-ish brush, and I'm going over the edges. I feel like it's looking a little patchy. I'm gonna switch my brush actually. I'm gonna take a denser brush. This is from Blend Bunny, and I'm just gonna go back in and layer this back on. Okay, that's definitely better. I'm gonna go back with this brush and go just over the edge of that. I just feel like this brush maybe is like, it's just like taking off the shadow. I'm taking this purple just on my pinky, and I'm gonna pop that onto the lid and blend it out into this outer corner. And then I'm picking up this shade on a pencil brush, and that's gonna go right onto the inner corner. And that applies so nice. I didn't miss my brush or anything like that. I do have quite a bit of fallout between those two shimmer shades for sure, but I can just kind of blend it away for the most part. I keep trying to go back and forth here, but it just doesn't want to stick down. It feels like it's constantly blending away, so I'm just gonna have to let this one go. So here's the finished look. For the second look, I primed with the Ulta Beauty Matte Veil Long Wear Eye Primer. And I'm going to be dipping into the Blooming Romance Groundwork palette, taking the shade Desire, the cream version of that split pan. I'm just going to put that into the crease. Just adding a little bit more, definitely buildable formula. Picking up Evermore, the cream part, and just popping that on this outer corner to deepen this up. And I'm gonna wipe off my brush, and I'm gonna take Dreamy, and I'm gonna use that shade to kind of blend this out. I'm gonna bring it underneath my lower lash line a little bit, and I'm gonna go back in with Evermore just a little bit. And that's it for the matte. So onto the shimmers. I'm gonna use a brush this time, and I'm picking up this pinky shade, and I missed my brush just a little bit to help it spread out, and I'm gonna pop that right in the center of my lid. And then I'm taking this shade right here. This one did pick up just a little bit flaky, just a little bit. And I'm gonna put that on this inner portion of my lid where I left it blank. Yeah, that's not really blending out that nicely because of the flake. So I'm just gonna go in with my finger to kind of smooth out the flake. I'm gonna take just a little bit more, but I don't want to put too much on because then it's gonna look textured on my lid. I think that's pretty good. I also put it a little bit in this inner corner. Good thing is I had a minimal fallout on this eye. And here's the second finished look. So you already know how I feel about the packaging. In short, I think this larger palette should have been sold separately. I would have loved to seen these three sold individually because I think the price would have been lower, and it would have been even better if you were able to like pick the shades that you wanted in the 6-pan, especially because this entire palette is $128. So imagine if this was split into 3 different palettes. I think the price might have been a lot better, and if you were able to choose the shades, it would have been even better because then you're only getting the shades that you want. You might not want all of these shades. Obviously, if you want to purchase this, you want to use all the shades in here, especially for the price tag. Now, it does feel like really nice sturdy quality, so that's really good, and I do prefer this packaging to the previous packaging for sure, but I'm still just flabbergasted that I can't put my groundwork pans in here. So maybe in the future we'll see single eyeshadow pans getting released from Danessa Myricks, though I don't know if they will because these are not full-size pans, so these have 1.2 grams, which is totally fine. I think we don't need 26mm pans full of 2.5 grams of eyeshadow at this point. I think a lot of people have a lot of eyeshadow to go through, so I don't mind that at all. I think that's a good amount, but it just makes this palette harder to customize. You can fit Viseart mattes and the Clionadh single eyeshadows in here. We'll insert a picture, but they don't fully fit. The wells in here are just a little bit bigger, and also these are shallower because they are made to fit these pans. So moving on to the shimmers in here, I love that all of these are smooth. Pretty much. I think there's one shade, this one right here, that's just a little bit flakier, just a tiny bit, but nothing extremely flaky like some of her previous Lightwork palettes. Some flaky shades can definitely be harder to use. You also risk using too much and having it look textured on the lid, so I do really love that all of these are super smooth. Now, that being said, some of these are pretty emollient and pretty kind of almost squishy, or like they're very thick feeling, almost like a thick paste, and if you have hooded oily lids, you will probably have these crease on you. I wore this palette yesterday. I wore this shade, and this shade, and the iridescent shade did start to crease on me within the 3 hours. It wasn't too bad, but it was definitely a little bit noticeable, but I could tap it out. But just something to keep in mind, if you have hooded oily lids and you have a lot of creasing issues, you will probably experience them, and that's another reason to make sure you're not using too much. Then you have a thicker layer on your lid and it is even more likely to crease. So you can use a tacky primer, whichever one is your preferred one that works for you. However, sometimes I find that a tacky primer with a more emollient shadow just clash together because they have 2 different formulas, and whatever ingredients are causing that shadow to be more emollient sometimes just do not mix with the tacky primer, so it's gonna be kind of like a trial and error. So far, I'm not a huge fan of the satins. I definitely have to keep trying them out. In the first look, I had an issue of one of the shades just not wanting to stay put. It kind of kept getting blended away, and then yesterday when I used this shade, it's a little bit thicker feeling, so it's a little bit tuggy, and you really have to put in some elbow grease to really blend it out. So I have to keep trying these out, but I would have definitely preferred these to be actual mattes and not satin mattes, and also would have loved to see a brownish shade. This one is kind of like a brown, but I would have loved to see a deeper brown, especially instead of this darker purple, but that could just totally be personal preference, so keep that in mind. They're shiny, they're shifty for sure, and a lot of them are pretty easy to apply with a brush or a finger. Do I feel like this palette is worth it? Kind of yes and no. I would say if you are just in love with this and you really want it, I would just wait for a sale and get this at least 20% off. And I think the Sephora sale is coming up. There's definitely going to be at least 2 sales where they're going to have up to 20% off. Depending on your VIB status, it might sell out, but they do tend to restock these even though they're limited edition. I believe they restock some of the other previous palettes if there's enough demand for it. If you have a lot of multi-chrome eyeshadows, single eyeshadows from indie brands, then you definitely do not need this palette. You will for sure have some doubles. I would really consider if you feel like this is worth it for you, if you're gonna really get your use out of it, if you love the palette design, you love that it's stackable. So let me know in the comments below if you plan on picking this up, or did you already pick it up, and when you think of it, I would love to hear your thoughts. And that's everything for this video. If you love multi-chrome eyeshadow content, then consider subscribing. I have a lot of in-depth multi-chrome eyeshadow tutorials, swatch comparisons. There will be some other videos up on the screen, so you can keep watching, and if not, then I hope to see you next time.